see. Whoever buys the most products between those two organizations will be the winner. We'll see who runs up the tab. It'll be a lot of fun. So I know you guys know some of these people. Why don't you guys each take like a 30-second introduction and tell us about yourselves? Starting with you, Frankie.
All right. I'm trying to send links here, man. All right. My name is Frankie. I am from North Jersey. I don't know. I'm a mom, and that was not me. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I run a nonprofit, and I'm
What fundraising for today?
Oh, sorry. It's called Feed Philly. Can you? I feel like you're the other.
And it's PHEED.
PHEED. And we distribute care packages to the homeless living on the streets of Philadelphia. It's pretty sick. Well, not that there's homeless people.
Wow. What an ad. So riveting start introduction. Next, Nick.
I am Nicholas Magner, the New Jersey State Chair of Blue Star Union. Not sure what that really means, but I'm here.
He made up the title, not me.
Can I have it too?
That's the truth.
Yes. You're the North Jersey chapter president.
From South Jersey. A little bit different flavor, I think.
Real South Jersey?
Like real South Jersey.
So I'm Mike Rufo. I'm the South Jersey rep to New Jersey Libertarian Party, two-time congressional candidate, and the Northeast Regional Director for the Mises Caucus and the National Libertarian Party. We're here to wreck it up, and we're gonna kick some ass talking about some anatomy of the state, tell you why the state is illegitimate and why the Constitution probably isn't the best thing to safeguard us.
Sounds so professional.
All right, and then listen, today is my birthday. You're gonna go over to one of my several tweets today, and you're gonna hit that feedphilly.org donation button, and you're gonna drop some money. We got a goal of raising $1,000 today. I think we're upwards of close to $700, $300 away. If you guys can't hit that by the end of this podcast, I'm probably gonna go home and cry. So just hook us up and make sure we get that done.
He gets Brad on his drink right here. There you go.
Hey guys, Scott Hitchner from Salem County. Let's see.
Real South Jersey.
Real South Jersey, budding libertarian. Just here to hang out with some good friends and discuss some Murray Rothbard. There we go.
Frankie, try to act like you're not bored already. All right?
Dude, I told you I was trying to send the stupid link, and I'm like not technologically inclined.
I am Matt. I am the knucklehead behind Why Libertarian. We are simulcasting right now as well with Blue Star. I guess we're all here just to corrupt Scott is basically what's going to happen, right? Is that what it is?
I don't think
I'm well on my way.
No, I think his wife is
We've lined his pockets with several narcotics that he's not aware of right now. And we'll be making some phone calls.
Where are the 3D printers? That's all I'm looking for.
He's going to get his first black helicopter.
Game frogs! Game frogs! It's hurting the freaking frogs day. Guys, check. For those of you that are listening to Why Libertarian, welcome to Blue Star Union. And to the Blue Star Union people out there, make sure that you go and check out Why Libertarian on YouTube. Fantastic stream. Matt does a great job on that show. And now we have one more guest who wants to stay in the shadows for very sensitive reasons. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Tomo. I am a PhD student, hence why I don't want to appear on camera because
academia is very open-minded and accepting
alternative
viewpoints.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm just really excited to dive in and talk about these issues because, anatomy of a state is really poignant for everything that we're dealing with right now with the whole election and everything that just happened. So I'm excited to dig in.
Awesome. All right. So there's no denying that for a political layman, reading this kind of content is jarring. Right?
Very.
It is not conventional in this sense. Is that a fair thing to say?
No, 100%. And the reason why I say it is because I'm not a reader. I've always had some.
Wait, you read this? I thought you listened to it.
You didn't read it.
Well, you're right.
It's like my son read it to me every night before bed.
Exactly what it was.
He indoctrinated my child by making him read it.
To be fair, I listened to it. Okay, that's how I process my information. That's how I hear things. But this book is the single most. If you have anybody that's interested in politics or interested in liberty or freedom, this is the book you give them. This is the book, and this is the book that I read, quote unquote, listened to that completely changed the way I feel and think about things. Or it also the things that I've thought already it kind of put it in, I guess, word form.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
It's like our libertarian dad.
Before we get like deep into philosophy and stuff and start cracking around, who can give like the 30,000 foot elevator pitch for what the thesis of the book is?
All right, so
Here he has a microphone.
So I would venture to say that the thesis of the book is that everything that we're witnessing happening right now in the world of politics is rooted in centralized power. All right, so what you have is you have a group of people that are looking to pretty much parasite themselves off of their neighbors, and they centralize some power and they give themselves legitimacy, and then they steal from their neighbors. It's essentially what it is. They talk about how you can do it state to state, you can do it from state to person. They basically are a parasitic body.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for ruining
I really
that.
want to hear myself.
No one
But,
heard it except for you guys.
I mean, that's like a really quick and unfortunately probably not layman enough explanation. But it's if you want to understand what's exactly happening right now and everything that you've witnessed in the last 6 months in the world of politics and inside the United States, read this book and you're gonna be like, oh my God, that's what they're doing. This is what's happening. Why do we let them do that? And you'll have that moment, that light bulb moment. This book it's the time that this book needs to be out there.
So let's see how we can draw some parallels into like contemporary, the left-right paradigm of partisan politics. So Austrian economics, the general like philosophy of the entire movement prior to Rothbard was predicated on individualism, right? That everything good that is made or any product or any property comes from individuals and not from these conspiratorial entities or governments or groups. You know, it's the foundational basis is the individual, is the most sacred thing in this philosophy. So I would say for a typical like right-wing person, that probably resonates with them. But then the entire discussion that you started to bring up before about how, hey, maybe the Constitution doesn't preserve this for us. So how do we like sell that message to a typical right-winger?
You sell to them by not saying that at all.
Correct. You
That's the
don't
truth,
bring that up.
because a lot of very heavy right-wing people are so attached to the idea of the Constitution. The Constitution, without them actually mentioning the Bill of Rights, and that the fact that you can have the Bill of Rights without actually having the Bill of Rights, because you should have those rights already.
All right, here's where this book comes into play, because this is where if you are on the right and you're going to read this book, when you get into the second chapter, it's going to talk about the replacement of the divine state with not the individual leading the state as being the divinity, but as the Constitution being the divinity, and that people are worshiping the Constitution, whereas they would normally have worshipped the head of state that was deeming themselves as divine. And that's where the parallels start to come into play. So when you look in the second chapter and they talk about, he goes, in the present more secular age, the divine right of the state has been supplemented by an invocation of a new God. And this is where it really comes into today, science. So state rule is now proclaimed as being ultra scientific, as constituting planning by experts, by, hold on, I'm a little drunk. But while full disclosure, great reference. That was my Alex
Next
Jones
you can be
moment. That's why you need to buy my supplements. The link will be at the end of the show.
By the way,
Alicia
Commissioner says, happy birthday, Rufo.
Yeah, thank you.
She also said that she's already corrupted Scott, so don't worry about it.
That's nice. I wasn't going to say that. But listen, but while reason is invoked more than the previous centuries, this is not the true reason of the individual and his exercise of free will. It is still collectivists and determinists, still implying holistic aggregates and coercive manipulation of passive subjects. I didn't realize how much I drank. That was really bad. I literally read all things to people every day, all day.
Well, if Scott checks his pockets, he has something to speed you up if you want.
I have a question though. So couldn't we circumvent that argument by just bringing up the arbiters, like skipping talking about the Constitution and bringing up the fact that like the state basically nominates its own people to navigate through the documents, in which case you would just kind of get them there and then be
That's
like,
exactly what
so like with the Constitution, and then you can kind of bring it in that way.
So I've actually had this conversation recently with somebody, and I was like, I don't know how, because they're waiting for like different gun laws to pass here in New Jersey, and they're saying, I can't wait for it to go to the Supreme Court of the United States. And I say, well, that's funny, because the Supreme Court of the United States is not an elected position; it's appointed by the state. So you have the state running the state with the state.
Yeah.
Right,
You're
It's
going to
appointed
have-
by the other two branches.
You're gonna
Of the
take-
three branches, the
Yeah.
other two.
You're gonna
the third
take
branch.
a court case against the state to the state and have your argument against the state be to a person in the state and then make a decision against the state. It makes no sense.
And they sorry, you go next, but they transcribe the Constitution and the idea and what they transcribe is from the state. So of course, the state is going to work for itself. It's going to make sure that itself is in its favor because
Its preservation is
wholly
paramount.
parasitic in the beginning.
Preservation is paramount.
So that's one of the biggest things that I took. So like I took like three big things, right? That's number one that I took from this book, right?
You had a really good point.
It was basically that the judiciary provides cover for the excesses and the overreach of the state, right? So, Mike, you started talking about basically, where authority is derived from, right? Like, how do we look at someone who's the president or the Senate or something, or back in the day when we looked at the monarch and we're like, well, why do we even follow, King George? Why do we listen to him? Well, in the past, it was like, well, God deemed him the ruler. So what King George says goes, right? Now we have a system of 535 people, and the government needs some authority for us to be like, all right, when they speak, we listen, right? Well, the backing of that, the excuse my language, but the bullshit backing of that is the Supreme Court and the thought that, oh, well, the Supreme Court's going to protect us, right? It's always going to be there as the Alamo.
When it's making the rules.
Yes, right?
Right,
But
right.
the problem is what we found is more often than not, the Supreme Court actually ends up reinforcing, like you look no further than the ACA, right? Is it a tax or a penalty, right? We still don't fucking know,
Language.
right? That's exactly
They
what it is.
manipulate language to put themselves in a position of superiority.
Right?
That was clever. That was clever. That was an accidental joke. I like that.
Yeah, no, he didn't realize he
You didn't realize that.
No, the conversation
That was great.
Family friendly,
No,
very
it's just whatever you want.
positive.
Yeah. I was talking about testicles before, so I gave up.
But to make that point, they provide cover, right? So like whatever the crime family does, they are the crime family's attorney. That's exactly what they do. And as opposed to saying that God said that I could do this, it is actually the state
The
and
deity
the
of the state.
judiciary that provides that, like, oh, well, they're nonpartisan. They'll find for me and protect me. And it's not right. They get appointed by the same exact people that want to basically break down the Constitution or go around it.
Yeah, he talks about too. I mean, this is probably the most deceptive way of doing it, where there's democracy, so that you feel like, oh,
You're
the
a
people
part of
are
it.
making a choice. The
Yeah.
government is us.
I get a
But-
vote. I get
right.
a say.
And
Yeah.
that's how he opens the book, was talking about how, no, it's not you, because you can't harm, you wouldn't elect to harm yourself or to
Right.
arrest yourself. But then later on, he talks about the more primitive forms of government, like theocracies, and he specifically refers to like Oriental countries and says like, well, in some of those countries, they think the leader is the God, like
Yeah.
he is God. So it's like, it's a defense mechanism of you cannot go against the state because it's religion. That's the deity. You can't go
That's
against
it.
Do you think that kind of
which is not that different from our system in a parallel kind of way, but
that might have something to do with Thomas Hobbes and his idea of Leviathan? Like I almost feel
it's
like
getting deep.
well, no, I
Let
literally
me unplug.
Hold on, wait a minute.
Let me
Write another book
let me
into this.
Hold
Hold on, I didn't read that one.
to be fair, I just had to Google Thomas Hobbes' name.
do you watch Letterkenny?
No,
Yo.
I'm not-
Because you say
How
to
are
be
you
fair,
doing?
does anybody watch
I'm an
Letterkenny?
adult, so I don't watch
To be
it.
fair.
To be fair. No, but every time he says that, I think of that. Anyway.
But the point I'm trying to make is,
I'm trying to be fair.
lately when I see what everything is going on in like recent politics and everything like that, just trending pop culture, I almost feel like people have like this innate feeling that they need to be ruled by something. So like the
They
state
want a
is,
king.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, a leviathan. They want something to have the absolute power, and I feel like that's why government works so. I'm not saying it works well, but I'm saying for them that government works so well because it is like that leviathan for certain people, and I don't know how we can break people from that.
Well, we've talked about this amongst ourselves in our little private chats. We've referred to Jordan Peterson in his book, 12 Rules or whatever. He talks about.
I've never read it.
You never read it?
so good.
It talks about the lobster, the whole allegory about the lobster. Did you like it? Oh no, she's
Just kidding.
But he talks about like,
It's a
look,
good
if you just conventionally ask people like, do you want to be free? They'll be like, yeah. But it's like, okay, well, do you want to actually like work for this and that, or do you want to have welfare in case you lose your job? All of a sudden they start going, well, I don't know about that. We should have some safety nets, blah blah blah. And so Peterson talks about how it's like millions of years of biological evolution. Even a primitive animal like a lobster has a chemical like in his brain that lets it signal to other lobsters' hierarchy, right? So they understand like, no, I'm alpha to you, but I'm beta to you, and so I will listen to whatever you say. You get all the food, but I'm going to steal your food. And if a lobster understands that, humans certainly understand, right? You have some dude walk around as a big jacked guy, a small guy may like cower a little bit, and women signal women signal to each other mates. They're chasing a guy at the bar, and all of this is basic biology, like it happens across all these species. And he says that is natural, like hierarchy, and that sort of finding your place in the scheme of life is a natural thing. You look like you're about to say something.
I mean, I didn't want to interrupt the biology lecture. Very enthralling. Lobsters just.
But the state says that biology is not a real science anymore.
That is true.
Well, so that's
Okay,
all
well
right.
then-
Wait, that's another podcast.
I'm sorry.
Well, then I'm sorry, fuck you and your lobsters.
We have to do what the
No,
state
I
says.
want to hear what you were going to say. I'm joking.
Well, I was going to say, I think part of the big problem is, and then Rothbard brings up, is that it doesn't have to be support. It can just be like passing indifference, like, oh, okay, well, here's how it is, and we're just going to keep muddling along. And so I think that that's harder to fight than people who are passionate about something, Like, I don't know if there's anybody who's like super gung-ho about the government anymore, but they're just like, this is how it is. And so we have to fight their indifference almost.
Right, and Rothbard mentions that. He
Yeah.
says that you don't need a bunch of compliance.
Yeah, the majority doesn't have to be like
Right.
supporting the government. They just have to be like,
Quiet.
here it is.
Yeah, they just have to be passive.
It is what it
It's
is.
a
Like
great
kind of
point.
how I am with most of my life, except for like this kind of,
Right, exactly.
And that's that second chapter that he really goes into that. He really, that second little, I'm not gonna read again, but it
Do you want me to
is,
read it to you?
What the state is.
what the state is. When he goes into what the state is, and he really, is it the second chapter?
He's so
What does
cute
it
when he
say?
smiles.
It says number 2.
No, maybe it's not the second chapter.
You guys are really banged up with numbers and stuff. Just want to let you know.
Yeah, we're bad with that, right?
That's number 3.
I said bang up, not
Oh,
bad.
oh,
It preserves itself.
Maybe it's how the state preserves itself. I didn't.
No, what the
Well,
state
keep
is,
talking
that
without me.
was-
I always screwed this up.
I bought
That's
my
right.
book on Amazon really cheap, and it's not like.
Yeah, it's not the same.
So-
It's not the same pages
I got
as
mine on
mine.
Amazon too.
Hold on.
They were out of stock.
Oh, I got the last one.
Or this was $4, not 14. So like.
But regardless, when you start going into the book and you start reading about how the state does preserve itself and what the state actually, it probably is how it preserves itself. What version?
Oh,
do you
I
have?
can spell them. That's actually.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to talk. Part of the way what you're trying to say is how the state preserves itself. It is in, I think it's in chapter 3, and it talks about how like tradition
Yes.
is
Yeah.
and the idea of
history.
like, and history is like a strong way
Yeah.
of preserving the state because you idolize your ancestors naturally.
Correct.
And when you idolize your ancestors, you're also idolizing their leaders and their kings.
Correct.
So it keeps that oppression intergenerational. And then, it's tradition and nationalism is another one.
How
Exactly, yeah.
dare you talk bad on my constitution?
Well, he injects the
Exactly.
patriotism also becomes a weapon, the cudgel that the state
Right.
uses.
And
Yes.
then he
It's
goes,
not like any presidents in the past have used that, right?
right, exactly. And then he goes into if the tyranny is imposed, anybody who speaks out against it is now going to be cast as a conspiracy theorist because all of a sudden they're the ones who aren't idolizing and worshiping at those that came before them and not accepting narrative from those that were supposed to be worshiping.
100%.
So even if it is 100% legitimate and the state has worked with its partners in science and worked with its partners in media, it creates this false sense of confidence in what the message they're portraying. And anybody who has any kind of opposite thought is a conspiracy theorist, no matter what. And that's exactly what we're
We're giving
seeing.
credence to the
by the
Q people,
CIA.
by the way.
we are giving credence to the few people to an extent, and I understand that, but there also comes a point where you have to realize that when people start making predictions based on conspiracy and those predictions don't come true, then you know it's outright bullshit.
Then it turns into something that preserves the state.
Exactly, because now you're getting,
Yeah.
because when you're coming out and you're being completely dishonest and you're making stuff up and you're making these predictions and none of it's coming true, now you're giving credence to the state, and that people are going to turn around and say, see, we need this state because otherwise these crazy people are going to trick everybody. But then you have the people who know what's really going on completely in the corner, like, well, we're screwed. So which line are we getting into?
That's also the argument for why a lot of people think that like Q and certain things are basically
I didn't know,
side
just like, I didn't know.
right? Like it's essentially a staged organization or a staged event to undermine the conspiracy or whatever. I think Rothbard also points out something where the state doubles down on preserving itself. You
Yes.
just have to look at the penalties for someone who goes against the state versus someone who creates an infraction against a regular human being.
Here's your
right?
pop reference.
Yeah.
The Capitol.
Yes.
What happened? People.
The sacred cathedral, right? The most sacred
most
of rooms.
sacred
that has been
Sacred,
penetrated
the
many
literal word
times
sacred.
Yes.
over the last 2 years by
Right.
various
Listen,
activists.
what was it, in the 50s, there was congressmen actually shot
Yes.
while
By Puerto Rican
debating,
nationalists.
by Puerto
It's
Rican
always
nationalists, and that who were later pardoned, by I think Jimmy Carter.
They were 100%. Yes.
They were pardoned by Jimmy Carter after they literally shot with weapons in the Capitol building somebody. So to say that this was the greatest insurrection, it's just
And
mind-blowing.
here's let's pull it back into Blue Star's center of focus here. When someone invades your house in New Jersey, you have to give ground,
Castle
right?
doctrine.
We don't have a castle
We don't have.
doctrine.
You have
When
to-
it-
you're not in
When
the corner
when
and
it
you're
came
like
to the
this-
Capitol building, there were people thinking that the moment people came to the doors, they should have opened fire, right? That is a complete stark contrast, and that's exactly planned by the state to preserve the state itself. When you make an infraction against the state or you threaten its authority, treason,
But
sedition,
don't even,
insurrection.
let's not even talk
When
about
you
that.
threaten someone else who's an individual, maybe they
We'll
were
get
down
to
on
it.
their luck,
Yeah,
maybe
but
they were low on
Let's
money.
talk
things like that,
let's
right?
talk about theft, right? We don't even have to talk about the insurrection or whatever the hell people want to call it, right? That's what the mainstream
Sounds like
media is
such a
calling
dirty
it.
word.
It's right. It does, right?
Stupid and dramatic.
It's very.
Insurrection.
I do listen. Were they idiots?
You've got
It's very sultry.
This is how I walk after an insurrection.
Well, listen, were they idiots for doing what they did? Should people be? If you start destroying property, yes, you should be penalized. Yeah, should there be things?
Not when you own it.
It's our property.
Not when you own it.
Dude,
Yeah,
Steve
but
Stevens
here's-
got shot up at a baseball
So here's what
game.
here's what I'm
Nobody
gonna tell
gave
you.
a shit.
That's crazy.
Dude, he
right?
got shot.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But here's the point. The point is, we can get into a different conversation about we own it, because there's no such thing as we in the collective is bullshit. It's a big fallacy. All right.
All right, well,
So
make
it's
it strong.
made
So
right
we
now.
That's a strong point.
we can get into that. Nonetheless,
Right.
they still did go in and they did destroy property, whether we, which doesn't exist, own it, or not.
for it.
Somebody
He's right.
who still you paid your portion of it, but some dude who wasn't there paid his portion of it. So if you want to take it from the collective perspective, then yes, you did damage the property that somebody else also paid for, so you should still pay a penalty for it. I'm okay with that. Telling me that it's the worst thing that's ever happened in this country's history, worse than 9/11, is a bit hyperbolic. Okay. And
9/11 and Pearl Harbor
and
combined.
Pearl Harbor
Yeah.
combined, right? So, but
According to Chuck
nonetheless,
Schumer.
don't talk about that because you might upset somebody. Let's talk about just stealing, right?
Mm.
If you were going to steal, if I was going to leave here today with that television that doesn't belong to me and Dan didn't know and I stole it,
There's no way you get
there's no way he's getting it back. And the odds are the
They won't
cops are
make
never
the
going to get
steps.
me,
Right.
right? They're not even going to put forth the effort to try and find me, to come and get me, because it's not worth their time. But if I walk to town hall and I stole a television from town hall, you'll bet your ass they're going to put every cop in the department and three of their detectives on it to come get me because I stole state property. So are they more interested in protecting the individuals and the people that they work for, or are they more interested in protecting their own authority and their own power?
I answer your question right now. They're protecting their own power, and
Of course.
my case in point is this: how many
That's
National
a
Guard?
rhetorical question.
How many National Guard decided to be called up around the state capitol during the inauguration? 50,000.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Wait, that was the
that
number?
was not. It was closer to 50,000 last time I read.
Okay.
So you have 50,000, and even if that's wrong, you know for a fact 25,000 was what they were using a week ago, right?
Right.
You have a government who is pissed off that people enter its capital, right? And they go and they hire and bring in National Guard, but it's not only National Guard, because if you're only counting National Guard as 25,000, you also have state police from every fucking state that are there.
Why are you
Okay?
pointing at
They're I'm talking.
You brought the
I'm not a
ball.
cop, because I'm Italian.
But now
I
let's
use my hands, but they're flexing. They're flexing there with the amount of force to make you feel like a small piece of shit, because they're the government. They're the big bad government. They're there with their guns with no magazines loaded.
No magazines.
Okay.
Yes.
And you know how you know it's the truth? You know how you know it's the truth?
Yeah.
As soon as it's over, these motherfuckers are sleeping on the concrete of a garage.
They
somewhere.
kicked him out of the hotel. They said, you can't sleep. No, you're gone. As Joe Biden sits in his fluffy bed in Lincoln's bedroom or whatever freaking room he decided to take in that damn mansion. All right. Now they got them sleeping in garages. It's mind blowing. They don't care about anything but themselves and preserving themselves. And then it goes to Rothbard when you look at it and you go into what the state fears. And they fear their loss of legitimacy. They fear the individual understanding and realizing that, hey, I don't really need them. Like, what are they really doing for me and not for themselves? And that's why they constantly work with all the partners that they work with to flex on people.
So this goes to my number 2 takeaway from the book. Okay, the idea of war and conflict. Okay,
That's what state fears. Yeah.
and they're afraid of war and conflict taking their power. They have to convince you that it's you that are in danger,
Right.
but you aren't.
For your
It's-
safety.
It's them, right? It's the people in power that are in danger. It's the reason why they institute a draft, right?
Right.
Back in the day of feudal lords, like the movie Braveheart, right? All those dudes are standing around with a bunch of lords going, why the hell are we here fighting for these assholes' land?
Right. It used to be a war between rulers, which he says. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Apparently it's
when
Right.
war or conflict breaks out, they have to convince you that we're all in this together. It's a threat on the American
Just like
family.
It was an attack on the people.
They hate us for our liberty. And you're like, bullshit. They hate us because you decided to flex on another country to bomb their hospital with men, women, and children that were innocent.
Because one person might have been there.
Because one person might have been there, right? Well, I don't know. The intel was sketchy, but we had good reason to
They
think they
had
were
to be
there.
on good information and on good reasoning.
But they have to convince you. They have to pull that, what was the word, patriotism, right? In the movie Shooter, like when they push that patriotism button, I show up, right? Like that's
they
the
know the
thing.
exact buttons to push.
Exactly.
Quote from the
And
movie.
that's
Yeah,
and that's
Napoleon was big on that. He was like the one that kind of championed the idea of like pinning medals on people and they're patriots and
exactly.
they're heroes. And
The perfect example is when they're done with you. Then when they're done with you, you're gone. You're dead to them. They don't even care about you until the next time they need to put bodies in front of the bullets that are faced to that. So,
It's also the other way too. Like if you're not in danger, then you're being selfish. Like
yes.
it's one or the other. Like you either are in grave peril and you need to rely on us, or if you want to go against us, you're just completely against the we that doesn't exist.
Well, how did they portray draft dodgers from Vietnam? Right? Like Vietnam and Korea are perfect examples of wars and conflicts that didn't pose a direct threat to the American people. And yet they still rallied support from these people, and they had a portion of the American population fought back and said, no, you're worried that you're going to lose some favorable dictator or regime in another country because you want trade or oil or something along that line. And they had to convince people, and then eventually, basically a huge portion of the population said, bullshit, they don't pose a threat to us. That's their stuff. Let them do it. And they had to essentially demonize the people that fought back against it, even to this day. Because who was it? Was it Romney or who was the one who threw his medal over the fence and ran for president? And they were basically ripping on him. I forget who it was.
I don't think it was Romney.
In one of the primaries.
He's too much of a bootlicker. I don't
No,
know
I
if
was
he
gonna say
served.
Romney. The
He
only
said
thing
he's
he served
libertarian.
was like his
Yeah,
service when he was 19 for the Mormon.
my
But-
dog.
but
I
that-
just remember putting the dog on the car.
But that label follows you for the rest of your life.
I remember that
Right?
shit.
But that label follows you for the rest of your life, right? Like you're anti-patriotic because you didn't want to die for some aristocrat who was threatened or had some financial gain or windfall that they wanted.
Well, I saw on Facebook today, somebody was talking about the National Guard garage thing, and they posted pictures of their husband's time in Saudi Arabia and how awful it was. And I was just so tempted, but like also not interested in starting this fight, to be like, okay, but I have a question. Why are we there? Like, why are we in Saudi Arabia? Like,
I recently lost a childhood friend over something.
oh, we're me too.
Yeah, so a
Yeah,
friend.
It's not a
me
contest,
too.
guys.
So no,
Are we
like,
commiserating?
One to one.
Scott, who did you lose this week?
an old friend. of
Besides a
mine
possession charge.
who I was like super close to. He's riding with me, so.
Riding dirty, back to South Jersey.
So I don't want
Nice.
Look, one more thing I wanted to mention that we discussed earlier today. A bunch of like organizations like the New Yorker and all of these New York magazine, tabloids, newspapers went into the Capitol with the protesters and
Yeah.
documented it.
Yes.
Is the FBI knocking on their doors?
So
No.
it,
Why
it,
not?
it did happen, but to somebody, his name is Nick Ox, and Nick Ox is like a Proud Boy, but he owns also a media company. He was in there. He was arrested by the FBI.
Right.
So it's like, no, they
Because he's the
weren't.
wrong kind of.
He's the
journalist.
wrong kind of
Opposition
journalist.
media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a weird dichotomy. It really is, because you have people who are like press. Like if I throw a press pass on, they don't know who I am. I can go in there too, right?
Well, press to them means you work for our accepted list of, CBS, Viacom, Disney. Unless you work for those conglomerates, you're not really press. You're just a bullshit artist. But you look like you're about to say something. Scott.
I was gonna touch on the Vietnam thing. How like there was an old soldier on the Jocko Willink podcast. I believe it was about a year ago, and how he said that they were ordered to take a hill, lost a bunch of men, finally took it. Then it was like a couple weeks later, we're like, oh, you know what? Just pull back. Not a big deal. This was just a photo op. Obviously, they didn't say it was a photo op, but it was not strategic. It was completely political. So like, yeah, it's just wild.
They needed a win, right? Like
They needed a win
Yeah.
for the propaganda.
Yeah.
I could say.
no, and that's another element here is that very close synergy between the media and the state, right? Like the state has to control the narrative. Okay, so you see it right now with the cleansing that's happening, right? Typically, and what's funny is I was watching part of the problem with Dave Smith and Malice, not today's episode, but the most recent one, and they were talking about basically how like when you win a contentious election, normally there's a little give back, right? Because you want to bring those people back into the fold, right?
There's been zero.
There's in fact, it's not even zero. It's
wanna
they're
purge
hitting
them.
the gas.
Yes, yeah.
Right? It is like
Brennan said
cleanse.
libertarians are terrorists.
Well, we're fascists.
We're being looked
insurrectionists.
into. We're being looked into as terrorists.
That they need to
huge
purge these
nowadays.
bad elements of the Republican Party.
Yes.
I said that like a week before
Well,
that
that-
happened, that I got into an argument with somebody. And I was like, okay, and after you guys are all done, who's to say that I'm not next? And they were like, oh, don't be so dramatic. Don't
Well,
put your
that's-
politics into this. And I'm like,
This is politics. When you talk about the state is the embodiment of politics, right? It's political parasite. It's a political parasite.
What's the exact definition?
What does he say?
Right.
Look it up.
And remember that he
Political
says,
structure.
people think that like the state creates things, and Rothbard specifically says, it's always an antecedent to a free market, right? It always
Exactly.
comes after.
It always comes
cannot-
after because
It's parasitic.
It notices
Yeah.
the accumulation of wealth and property amongst the people in this, that they're doing it freely, which is what he calls a social power
Right.
versus
Like authoritarian or
what do you say? It's a social power versus I forget what or state power versus state power.
Yes.
Right. And the social power is when you have all of a sudden people come together and it becomes wealth and people are doing well, and all of a sudden the state comes in and says, hey, we need some of
Oppenheimer
that.
termed it as the political means to wealth.
The political means to wealth is politics, right? And that's exactly what they're doing, and they're acting in a parasitic way by just taking from what other people are creating.
Yeah.
What does the state actually produce? The state
Nothing.
produces
just
absolutely nothing. They
Yeah.
take. And to go to the point where we're talking about the terrorists, where we're talking about terrorists and everything, right? War is the ultimate in the state's power.
Yeah.
When the state is in a state of war, okay, they have ultimate power. And he says, in war, state power is pushed to its ultimate. And under the slogan of defense and emergency, it can impose a tyranny upon the public, such as it might openly be resisted in a time of peace.
Yep.
Right? So things that they will do that you would lose your mind over in a time of peace, which don't be so silly and political comes into play.
Yep.
All of a sudden, if they stir up enough fear and tell you, hey, we gotta go to war, now all of a sudden it's okay. My question to people is, all right, you're cool with everyone getting purged off of Facebook because Facebook's a private company, right? What starts happening when people start disappearing out their homes? You're gonna be cool with that too?
Yeah.
Because if you're cool with them purging people off of Facebook and shutting people up on the internet, I promise you're gonna be the jackhat that's cool with them putting people in train cars.
Yeah. Enter COVID.
I mean, that's a really
Right.
far stretch, though, social media from there, I think.
I don't think so at all.
I
because,
mean,
because those
that's
people,
the direction.
because
They're
they're
using that language.
but they're using the same
Could you
language.
imagine-
They're labeling these people as terrorists. They're telling you that the people at the social media is ostracizing are people that are that want to ruin the democracy, and they want to go against everything that is holy in the cathedral. The next qualified step is, hey, we have this outside source that isn't the government saying that these people are evil. They can easily sew them in as evil according to the government in the cathedral. And now all of a sudden, hey, you know what? Not only did that guy deserve to get kicked off of Facebook, everything he said on Facebook, well, that's causing insurrection. So we're going to round him up and a bunch of his friends too at the same time.
They legit
It's not a far stretch.
they legit use the phrase re-education camps.
Right.
Okay.
It's Soviet. It's
Legit
Yeah.
use the phrase re-education camps,
And-
and they said that they had to basically reprogram the Trump people.
Which
This
really
is like
means kill
this
eventually.
is well,
They definitely said that.
kill or send.
Eventually.
See, someone like Austin Peterson or someone shared the video of the people in Hong Kong being loaded onto the buses, right? And I said, you know what the difference is between there and here, at least for the time being? We have guns, and the people that were standing around that bus would have been able to defend their loved ones,
Yeah,
right?
and they're showing
That's
it.
the difference.
But here's
okay?
my fear. My fear is that as the state creates the propaganda and they go on TV and say, we're looking into these people, even if you try to tell me like that, like the fact checkers did to Spike Cohen's post, that Brennan wasn't actually that Brennan wasn't actually talking about all libertarians, only the people that identified as libertarians that went to the protest. But now I can say yes, but now it allows them to have the ability to connect. Oh well, you know what, guys, we thought it was just the libertarians that went to the protest. Turns out it's all of them. We're going to start rounding up more libertarians because if you come out and speak out against the state, you clearly don't support our democracy and you don't support the sacred halls that we work through, and you don't deserve to be in free society.
I mean, I hate to be that guy, but could you imagine if there were social media?
Be that guy.
Hey,
Be
hey.
that guy.
Listen.
Don't you gender me! Damn it.
Do you want to share your pronouns before you continue?
Yeah, all of them. So anyway,
I don't know where that's going, but
Wait a minute, you know,
talk about
just so you know, our sponsor and friend Lauren Zadi Coffee said, whoever that PhD student off camera is, hell yeah.
Yeah.
But go on.
Dr. Tomo.
Dr. Tomo.
yeah. But no, I really don't want to.
Don't know you didn't go there.
Let him make a point.
I really don't want to be that person. But could you imagine if there were social media in the 40s, in the 30s and the 40s? Like that would have escalated so much faster than it did.
Yeah.
I mean, that happened really quickly without social media.
Yeah.
Imagine what could have happened.
Let me mansplain this for you. If you're a disciple like Obama was of Saul Alinsky, he wrote rules for, yes, pay attention. He
I don't know
wrote,
if my familiars can handle it.
this is the right group.
This is why libertarians are amazing.
He writes in Rules for Radicals exactly what you're talking about. This is
Smaller
not.
words, please.
This is.
Monosyllabic.
Maybe she was a size queen.
Listen, she's intellectually superior to all of us.
Let's just be careful. So this is nothing new. It goes back to even Hitler. You know, if you go back to the German, to Deutschland, he talks about the steps for radicalizing movements. Right? He's not really talking about like government. He's really talking about like ideas and concepts. But it applies to this, and it coincides with what Matt and Mike were talking about. Those rules are to separate and dehumanize, right?
Yes.
As soon as you dehumanize someone and make them below that, they're no longer a person. It justifies violence against them.
Yes.
Now you can't just go and start shooting people because they'll be martyrs. But if you can call them terrorists or insurrectionists or people with wrong think, and you get the sympathy of the majority, they'll have no problem throwing those people in a train and
The
sending them to a
label
camp somewhere.
sticks. They want the label to stick.
And that always is the first step. The first step is to kill their speech and dehumanize them and separate them and segregate them mentally.
I mean, even look at the way that they're depicted. Like one of the things that they did was in the 40s was they made those political cartoons and they made them look subhuman.
Yeah.
Look at the way that they depict anybody who doesn't support what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like they just, I don't know. It's almost like the same exact thing. And I wish there were some kind of reference, like, I don't know, like the internet or something that might hold that.
I mean, we have all this knowledge on the supercomputers in our pockets?
Why, yes!
Oh my goodness! Maybe somebody could do
I had to
something
check,
up on
I had to check my
DuckDuckGo.
tiny girl pocket, but I do in fact have one.
Dad, wow!
Can someone check my tiny girl pocket, please?
I think we know that Dan's the real woman here tonight.
Why are you wearing girl pants?
Listen, I'm fluid.
Well, Dan is going to be referred to as she for the rest of the night. No offense.
I get called that all the time, by the way.
Really?
Every time I'm
That
like a doctor's
sucks,
office, Danielle, I'm like, right here. And they're like, oh, sorry.
It has an LE. You know, we make jest of a lot of the things that we're talking about, but everything we're talking about in this book draws complete parallel to what you've watched. The reason the state is using the rhetoric that they're using and the language that they're using is because of the existence of social media. It is a direct threat to their authority as people wake up and understand what's actually happening and going on.
Yep.
Yes, I understand that there are some crazy Q theories out there. They're not real, folks. They've proven themselves they're not real. Now all of a sudden Joe Biden's Q. Like, come on, I'm done.
That was the best
like
twist
this
ever.
is insane.
That was the only one that could
People,
people.
I honestly, like, it's enough already. I'm done with it. Right? It was fun to watch. I laughed at it. I laughed at my friends. Guys, move on. But nonetheless, that's why the state's clamping down as hard as they are right now, because the internet, the social media, it's awoken people to the fact, like, what are they doing? When the spending bill comes out, look at how quick they go into, oh, well, you guys are talking about the other parts of the bill, not just the coronavirus bill. The coronavirus bill does this to the schools, this to this. This is all. I go, yeah, but you lumped them all into one giant omnibus bill and forced people to vote on the coronavirus in order to give all of your friends all of this money.
Yeah, I think there's
Also,
also
they had a
something in there
lot harder
about.
for me to stream UFC tonight too, because there was anti-virusy stuff in that omnibus bill
Oh,
as well.
there was also I think there was a request that they'd release all like alien evidence within like 180 days in the coronavirus bill. That's complete, the right thing to focus on. That's my words.
Yeah. Well, no, that dovetails into COVID so well. You started off talking about. Go ahead. Go ahead, Frankie. We've been bogarting the mic. Go ahead.
No,
Join me in marginalizing the women on that side.
Yeah.
Damn, man, no, you didn't talk. You're such a misogynist. You're doing more than enough. Why are you such a misogynist?
Matt the white knight.
God,
You have the male feminist.
wow, you're a misogynist and a male feminist all in one. Well, they usually are.
I was going to bring up in the section of how the state preserves itself, where I actually wrote in the margins here, COVID, new normal, because it says, listen only to your brothers or adjust to society, thus becomes ideological weapons for crushing individual dissent.
Yeah.
So that ties right into what you were just going.
Well, yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's and the that phrase, like, don't waste a good crisis.
Yeah.
Like, that's exact. I mean, it's.
That was Obama's
overused.
guy. Rahm Emanuel, yeah.
Yeah, but it is the most truthful. It's the most truthful telling thing. It's like it's like the Capitol storming, right? We were talking about it before we went live. The folks that stormed the Capitol didn't accomplish anything. If anything, it's a negative because it gave them a narrative to now advance executive authority powers to strip more freedoms. And like Rufo said, and what Rothbard wrote is, in normal times, you would not put up with this shit. You wouldn't. And all of a sudden, it's an emergency. And you're afraid. So it's okay. I forget who made the point the other day. I think it was Kurt from Checkmate the State on Twitter. He made the point about Julius Caesar and taking over Rome and how Rome would suspend the Republic and give it to Caesar during times of war. And Julius Caesar went, yeah, that sounds fantastic, but I'm I'm having too good a time as a supreme ruler. So
I'm not giving
fuck
it
that
back.
noise. I'm going to keep it myself, right?
Right.
Like, and that is exactly the problem we have now. We didn't have an inauguration this week. We had a freaking coronation.
Yeah.
That's what that was. That was a scene out of Star Wars. It was a scene out of the Hunger Games. Like I'm sorry, I'm getting away from Rothbard here.
To be fair, every inauguration ever has been a coronation, and they've all been discussed.
Well, yes, I know,
Hey,
completely
Lady
true.
Gaga was at this one, so you shut your
I know,
door.
just like the Hunger Games, right?
She's an American treasure, damn it.
I want to throw something out there real quick. For the people watching on Matt's stream, if you have a question for any of these fine characters, throw it into any of the chats on whatever platform you're watching. Same goes for Blue Star. If you have something you want directed at a particular person or just want to ask a question for us to answer, throw it out there. And as I see them come through, I'm going to put them up on the
Just
screen.
shame Dan for his mansplaining and his massage.
Feel free to troll the hell out of me to trigger me and really get me off.
Excuse us?
Oh, wait, we're getting,
Yeah,
we're getting off
Hop it
now?
off. Hop it off. I
We're
said
going
it.
back to Nick
Oh, I
Cotton.
said it. See, that was a deliberate joke. That joke was deliberate.
Language.
That language was.
I'm going to cut that clip and make a GIF out of it.
Earmuffs, kids. Earmuffs.
Oh.
You guys having secret jokes behind the audience's back right now? What's going on?
Absolutely.
Shout out to Boogie Queen.
Frankie, what were you going to say? Nothing.
So the third biggest thing that I took out of this book is, so we've talked a lot about kind of like how the state is constructed, how it controls things, how it preserves itself, right? The third biggest thing I took out of it was, all right, where does the buck stop, right? Like if we are subservient to the state, okay, then what is the state subservient to? Well, you actually have a situation where libertarians always get told like, well, libertarianness won't exist anywhere. It exists internationally. The countries themselves legit work with each other with no supreme power. Now, you could make the argument that America is kind of the ringleader because of how much we spend on defense and things like that. But still,
Other countries.
the other countries could band together in order to fight back if they wanted, right? So there is a level of free market when it comes to the states themselves having to negotiate. But they don't give us that freedom, right? Like they only give that freedom to themselves. And that's the only time that they're kind of on an even playing ground, right?
This is an interesting point because if you were to ask a layman, they would say America is the freest country in the world, right? You don't think they'd say that? You don't think
Oh, no, they would.
Okay, so let me build on that. Let me build on that.
They tell me all the time.
Simultaneously, we're one of the youngest republics in the world. Also, fair thing to say. Yet somehow, like, even though people believe statement number one, that we're the freest, we're the best, this is where live free or die, all that kind of stuff. Yet we have
And anti-federalists, by the way,
the
who
largest
didn't want the Constitution.
we have the
Anyway, sorry.
largest military state. We have the most bureaucratic federal and state governments. We have the most colossal state the world has ever seen. Yet we just started 250 odd years ago, and people still believe like we're the best. Right? We're the most
We're close
exponentially
to China
faster than
standards.
other
They've been
countries.
in power for thousands of years.
Right. It's like an interesting dichotomy to work through, which buttresses your point.
But I have friends that live in Malaysia and Thailand that I went to high school with. They moved out there for work or whatever. And they're like, "Oh, dude, we love it out here. You think America is free?" And I'm like, "Not really, but." And they're like,
I'd love
they're
to work in
"Do you know what? It's so free here, but I can't talk about the king."
Yeah.
But wait, we're getting to that point now,
But
right?
the
Where you're
best
getting
lady
silenced if you speak out against, if you speak out and say that Biden is evil or Kamala Harris is evil, you're ostracized in society.
Yeah.
See, our
Fair
state
point.
has put itself in a position where, hey, we don't need to use the traditional weapons of war. We're going to leverage the corporate socialism to force these corporations to do it. And guess what, folks? That's called fascism. It's not democratic socialism that you voted for. It's democratic fascism that you voted for.
They said, you know what?
Fire!
I really love Thailand. It's the
Best
best.
performance goes to
Careful, Nick's
Where does that go?
Yeah.
That goes to his little
They don't like
lady
my ass.
Interesting.
They don't like
pocket.
my
Little
ass.
lady pocket. But they said, you know, I really love Thailand. It's super free here, but every time I watch a movie, I have to stand for the national anthem.
That's
swear to God.
that's what happens on military bases when you watch movies. You have to stand for the anthem.
It's also why they do it in schools, in public schools.
Absolutely.
It's that same militaristic, like,
We didn't
hey,
stand for the
boys,
national anthem before starting this.
Oh, shit.
oh, we did it. Who should we salute right now?
Ronaldo.
Ronaldo.
Shout out Ronaldo.
Right there. Cristiano Ronaldo.
Man, his arms and legs move too. Especially the legs. Boy, do they bend. Dude, you're gonna love it. These guys are so athletic now. Anyway, look, I'll just say, go ahead, before I get more abstract.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say that overall, I think that if there's anybody, and this is kind of on a serious note, unfortunately, but it's like if you think that anyone is like a budding libertarian or is into freedom.
What do you want to search for?
Siri, bring up my last 10 searches, please. And loudly.
Stop
It'll
translating to
be
Siri.
Pornhub, Chatterbait.
Those just come up by themselves. That's not your fault.
That's my favorite from Google.
Shadow ban.
Rockbardnew.com. So,
How do I read Anatomy of a State by
Yeah.
listening to
how
it?
to actually read.
So Daniel Krauss says, a little secret Rufo doesn't want you to know. He knows all the words to the Soviet national anthem.
Oh, Dan, I love you, you sexy man, and that is so not true.
Did anybody go to Rutgers?
I went there to party.
So one of the
Dead honest truth.
I drove past its exit on the way.
Bought a
Yeah,
soda,
don't
bought a
stop.
fat sandwich once.
Disgusting. Those are
That bitch is a good
Dude,
sandwich.
so they deify this guy named Paul Robeson, who was this like activist back in the early 1900s.
Yep.
And
Free strokes.
he's African American, but one of his claims to fame is like he actually endorsed like the Soviet Union, and he sung an English version of the Soviet national anthem, and like he made money off it. It was like a big thing, and everything on campus is named after him. Everything.
Yep.
So when we were there, part of some political groups, there was one hall that was not named after any namesake. It was called New Jersey Hall, like literally as a placeholder, because they didn't have anyone that no one donated to.
They could name it after me.
So they could. So we petitioned them and said, listen, Milton Friedman is an alumnus. You don't have any money anyway. It's just called New Jersey Hall. Why don't you name it Milton Friedman Hall? And they were like, no, because we're going to call it Paul Robeson Hall or some nonsense. Like, I'm like, the guy literally sang the Soviet national anthem, and nobody knows this. Like, this is going back to the academia stuff that our PhD candidate here can't talk about. But yeah, it's like, unless you have the right thinking, you can't really bring up these things.
Kind of talking about Russia right now, though. Have you seen what's going on in Russia currently?
Yeah, they're in the streets.
So basically, they're in the streets getting
Insurrectioning
fucked up
everywhere.
by the state. The state
Yeah.
is
Sedition.
destroying
Yeah.
protests.
Yeah.
Because basically what happened is that you have Navalny is a big open critic of Vladimir Putin. He was poisoned. They found out that it came from the order of Vladimir Putin. So people are kind of out there protesting right now, just not in the name of Navalny, but like in the name of like just the state being too much.
Yeah.
And they've been fed up, and they're getting the state. If you can look at the pictures, they're destroying these protesters.
Yeah. And they got like MMA dudes beating up the cops.
Oh,
Like they're actually winning some of the fights. It's pretty gnarly.
it's crazy.
Maybe sneak Snowden out in the chaos.
So I want to throw some
Psyop.
So one of our great supporters,
He's
Jason Kruger, he's always listening to us. He's actually going to be on a future live stream. We're trying to pick a date together. He has a good question here for the crowd. I'd love to hear your guys' impressions of how Rothbard explains how the state will attach itself to the most prevalent religion to make what they do seem divinely backed.
Well, he does that in the very first chapter. He talks about how the preservation of the state, kind of like what Rufo was talking about before, about like, the national aspect, that if you speak out against the divine, if you speak out against religion, then you're automatically blasphemous. And that's mentioned in the very first chapter.
Yes. And then it goes into how it preserves itself as well. I mean, when you start talking about the social contract, and you start talking about all these other things, again, it goes back to language. It's a language that they use. And Nick made the point earlier where just as one is naturally going to worship their ancestors, they tie everything into this ancestral pattern. Whereas if you're not idolizing those that came before you, you are now being blasphemous, and you are no longer speaking the approved truth, of the centralized power. So I mean that they utilize that same aspect of conditioning that you would get from any religion, and they apply it to the state. It's been used and abused throughout all this and through all centuries, and we touched on it earlier.
Pope Francis is doing the same thing because he's saying like
Sorry, take that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like Pope Francis is doing the same thing right now. He's big into like, he was kind of pro-abortion like last year before that, wasn't he? He was talking about how it's okay. He's talking about how you unite against Trump. He's trying to affect the political sphere there. He's using his power as the Pope to affect literally millions of people, and they go for it. And that's part of that conditioning as well.
I read that on Q also. Yeah. He talks about that. You're absolutely right with everything you said. I'm saying Q also talks about that. Yeah, the Vatican and all of that.
Why not?
Oh wait,
he got arrested. I wasn't trying to poo-poo.
He was saying he got arrested.
Oh yeah, no, he's arrested.
No,
They're all
he was arrested.
He doesn't have COVID.
There was just like a fire somewhere, and they're like, oh, the smoke. Oh, they're going after some
New priest.
Yeah.
That's wait, how about all the
White
smoke in
smoke.
Washington D.C.?
Yeah, that was miles
It was
away.
it was miles away. It was in like some naval yard or
homeless
something.
Oh, it was on the
homeless camp.
highway.
Oh, wait,
Yeah, but no, they were gonna burn everything.
Actually, if you donated to Feed Philly, we'd be able to fight these problems and end homelessness. Frankie's not even paying attention when we're hawking her.
It's not home.
I'm
It's not
sorry.
Has she been drinking
If
or
there
no?
were no
All right, well, let's-
homelessness, there wouldn't have been a fire under the highway.
It's not homelessness
Donate to
anymore. It's
Feed Philly.
houselessness.
Yes, it's not homelessness, it's houselessness, right? Yeah, it's
Domicile.
More language change. More language changes to manipulate the way we view
It's important to
society.
be precise.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So let's talk about that for a second. So let's tie in Feed Philly to what the government has done. So the
Let's
government,
tie it in.
Nice.
the government has turned around and created a system in which they are the
Right.
ultimate arbiter of what is good and what is evil. So the way that Rothbard portrays this creation of the cathedral, we'll call it, right, for all intents and purposes, because I'm not reading the book and I've lost the words at this point. They deitize, is that the word?
Deify.
They deify. They
Yeah.
deify themselves to the point where they are the arbiters of truth.
Those short words that I never heard.
And they are speaking the truth. So when they turn around and tell you that we will take care of the homeless, we will take care of the homeless, we will ensure that everybody is handled, it removes the natural incentive for those in the community to step up and take care of the homeless themselves.
Yeah.
So then it puts an exorbitant amount of homeless people on the street, because every time they centralize something, it never works, it's inefficient, there's too much bureaucracy, because every dollar that goes to DC or to whatever central power is running it gets filtered through layers of bureaucracy and into their pockets first.
Yeah.
So every dollar you give them, maybe only 30 cents is going to the actual people that need it. So then we need somebody like Frankie and her Feed Philly organization to step up to fill the void. But if the government,
Or Blue Star Union to talk about civil rights.
but if the government didn't go in and ruin everybody's perspective as to who was supposed to help these people out, there would be more people contributing to Feed Philly.
Uh-huh.
Feed Philly would be far more effective than the government,
Uh-huh.
and people would be happier because of it, which is when you can turn around and say, again, them creating themselves as this deity has put us in a position where we're actually hindering the advancement of society and the reduction of poverty in overall.
Yeah.
So go to feedphilly.org, hit the donate button, and make sure we get us up to
For your
$1,000.
Yeah.
Right? That's the birthday promise.
Yeah.
That's what we're gonna do. We're at $700. Do me a favor, get on there and do it now. Thank you.
Just do it.
So
I won't. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to tell you what to do.
Voluntary. Voluntary. It's his birthday. Ladies. Throw some money.
It's my birthday. I want to do
Yes, queen.
So that question is actually really timely, because do you find it really weird that all of a sudden they're like getting into this like Biden is ultra Catholic thing? Right? It's like they're
His first thing was about abortion.
Yeah.
That's
Right?
the funniest part.
Mike, I mean,
and
Matt, sorry, there's
Stop
nothing really
doing
good.
it.
did I do something?
Dude, no, his Bible,
Yeah.
his Bible is ridiculously thick for what he said.
I-
Just to prove how Catholic he is.
Yeah, like yes, yeah, it's compensation, right? Like or something. Here's the issue I have though.
I know.
The religious aspect of it is also a component of that societal control, where they want to control the narrative, right? So they are going to integrate themselves into whatever center of influence that they can. religion is an extremely powerful center of influence, right?
Sure is.
And regardless of whether or not you're a believer, a non-believer, like if you have any kind of like religious belief, they will try and find their way into there in order, or at least like align themselves to be like, see, we're a fan of this group, or we're a fan of that group. It's part of the reason why they hated Trump so much, is because he had success despite the fact that he was like demonizing a religion, right?
Yeah.
And now, granted, as libertarians, we're all for First Amendment, freedom of association. You can believe or not believe as you see fit, right? But the problem that they had with Trump was he broke down this like, ultra PC, like all religions are important and don't like favor one versus the other. And then what you see is this underhanded crap where he is sitting there going like, I'm Catholic, I'm Catholic, I'm Catholic, I'm Catholic. And you're like, well, that's all well and good, but are you really focusing so much on the one religion that you are? Shouldn't you? And then in the other side of his mouth, he's like, well, I speak for all Americans, regardless of what they believe or how they voted. And you're like, okay, well then mention you're Catholic, and then let's freaking move on to something else that's like substantive and important.
But he's pious and he's trustworthy
Well,
because
yes.
he's got all
Did you guys see the
that.
They're
Jacobin
trying to
cover?
paint him
A
as
dove
good.
flew over his head. It was amazing.
Wait,
There was an olive branch
No, but
that
wait.
somehow grew in DC.
Wait, did you guys see the Jacobin cover?
No.
The
Yes,
Jacobin
you
cover.
sent it to us.
Yeah.
Right? I sent you guys the Jacobin, Jacobin,
It's
whatever it's called. It's that socialist rag or whatever it is. It's
Have you
literally
seen it?
like a
He's like
holy.
holy.
Yeah, he's got he's floating
But there's
like
Fauci as a
Jesus,
prophet.
and he's
There's
got
like
a.
doctors.
And there's
No.
doves flying, and
I
they're
know,
on
like-
their knees, dressed in Roman clothes and like the clothing of the
So
era.
wait.
Like it's
Sounds
wild.
like Trump over the Bible.
But there
Like,
are actual
Yes.
pictures.
No,
There
that's
are
exactly
actual
like that.
pictures of like.
Or the upside down Bible in front of the church.
Like,
Where
Yes,
he's
yes.
sitting with the
Behind it,
logo,
yes.
and the logo is yellow, and they stage him in such a way that it does look like a halo. Like they're doing it on purpose. It's not even
Absolutely.
Photoshop. It's
Symbolism.
just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So Kraus follows up here with another question. Well, first, Cheeto Man says, "Don't mess with Putin." He loves Putin. Cheeto, if you're listening over at the shop, come over and hang out with us after we're gonna burn a fire after this outside. Daniel,
That means weed.
way to ruin the talk.
Yeah, thanks.
It's all in Scott's pocket. We'll figure it out after. Daniel Krause says, would the American economic empire be able to survive if we pull back our navies and abdicate control of trade routes to the rest of the world?
Wait, say it again. I'm sorry.
Would the American economic empire be able to survive if we pull back our navies and abdicate
Just navies.
control of, that's inappropriate.
Well, the Marines got to get there.
Your hand is on the question.
Essentially, if we,
No,
alright, so
no,
yeah,
no,
no, navies pull out of patrolling trade routes and we
Okay.
bring them home, are we in danger? Or is our economic empire in danger?
If we provide the incentive for people to continue to safely trade, then absolutely not.
Right.
But there needs to be an incentive for people to peacefully trade, right?
Yeah.
So we would need to end the wars. We need to stop bombing schools and bombing weddings and,
Why do they hate us?
and starving children.
They hate our freedom, Dan.
They hate your freedom. It's not nothing to do with that.
Take some more
It has
freedom.
nothing to do with that
and
12-pound
Budweiser.
6-year-old. It has nothing to do with the 12-pound 6-year-old that we've
They
been
hate us
starving
into booty.
and paying to starve. It's nothing to do with that.
So Cheeto also follows up and says, I don't see them this is going back to the religion conversation. I don't see them attaching themselves to religion. They believe themselves to be God.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the
Uh-huh.
point that
Good point,
Rothbard
Cheeto.
makes. That's exactly what it is. They utilize all of the tools of thousands of years of human governance and create themselves as the deity, not for any other religion other than the religion of the state.
How
Which is
dare
why
you
the
blaspheme against?
Is
against
it also
God or us?
is it also cover for their sins? Right? Like is
Lots of
it
acts of contrition.
is
Yeah.
it their
We just got
alignment,
deep, bro.
right? Is it their alignment with the holy to be like, see, I'm so holy, I would never do something sinful. So if I did something,
Kamala would never do something so.
Now, she would
Exactly.
never hold prisoners beyond their sentence term for cheap slave labor.
And
She'd
Jason
never do it.
brought that up. He
But
said
that's-
Kamala Harris
that's
started
also
saying she's
in
a
the-
woman of faith.
That's also in the book though too, where they talk about if the state commits what would be a crime individual against individual, it's to be expected because it's for your own good.
Yeah.
Right.
We're
Right.
doing
It's
it
for your own
you.
good.
Yeah.
It's the suicide
Protect
thing.
you
Remember
from
they-
yourself.
Oh, and then he goes into that when he talks about war as well. He talks about when the state goes to war against other aggressors,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
to
not ready to
defend,
bring, I'm not ready to bring that up.
it's to defend yourselves.
That was the very first chapter.
It's to defend yourselves. You need to defend yourselves. But when you turn around there is no defense of yourself when the state itself starts to enact those tyrannies upon you.
Right.
It's then frowned upon that you are defending yourself.
Even from other people.
You're
but
therefore committing suicide.
But they
Right,
so
'cause
much
you are the
need you to
government.
defend yourself against other states to the point where they will conscript you and force you to do so. However, God forbid they enact tyranny on you. You're not allowed to defend yourself. This is for your own good. And that's what he talks about.
And if you try, you're being selfish because you're now putting your
Right.
neighbors at risk.
Right.
Because how dare you?
How dare you not
How
want
dare
tyranny?
Dare you.
Very dare you.
How dare you?
Thank you.
We all have some different.
Guys,
version
she's
of character
18
that we
now.
did that.
She's legal.
Oh, I was not doing
That's
that. I was-
That's what I
Yeah, well, you succeeded.
So what I want to
That blue star, you know.
So yeah, you're all right.
So now that Matt's
You're
gone, let's
officially
go
all
right now. You're all right adjacent now. Yeah.
Have you tried turning?
Anyway,
it off?
listen,
Take it
so
down?
what-
Join the
No, no.
Confederacy.
So what he
Oh,
talks
my-
about
look,
next is
you're
Calhoun,
right.
right? He talks about Calhoun and how
My
Calhoun, was it John Calhoun?
Actually.
Wait a minute.
Yes,
Calhoun,
John
yes,
Calhoun. He's
yes.
in there.
Right, he talks about how the
I read that. That's the name
Constitution.
of my weatherman.
I listened to that.
So he goes into the Constitution, how the Constitution was supposed to protect all of our rights against an overpowered state. Then he talks about how the judiciary is set up to change language and to create things so that it defends and helps, it actually helps grow the state.
Yes.
Okay? Then he talks about how Calhoun had the idea that what we need to do is have a minority protection by allowing the states to nullify everything.
Oh, yeah,
That
and then it
happens
trickles down to the
against-
individual.
Right.
Yeah.
You nullify what when the state comes together and says, hey, the federal government is wrong, that's not going to happen in our state. But then he goes into the argument of, all right, but what if that specific state is oppressing the people and the federal government doesn't have power to stop that? Then he goes, would it be up to the counties or the cities or the wards or the boroughs to be able to step up and nullify that? But what if the county or the city or the ward is doing it and there's nobody to stop them? When the only logical ultimate route is the individual needs to be able to stand up and nullify an oppressive law without risk of penalty. And that is truly where individual sovereignty comes from. And that's where the idea of anarchism comes from. That's where it is that you are. No, I know. Oh my God, I said the word.
Trump said they're
We
bad
like the
people.
Pee-wee's Playhouse, like,
Alphabet Boys.
You get swallowed by a cow.
But that,
And
you guys
"Woo!"
like
I love
Quaaludes
the state so
before
much,
you
but I
came
never
Because I'm not
married
seeing this.
it.
Hey, Chompy. I used to love
And you
Pee-wee's
were
Playhouse.
worried. You were worried it was going to be boring.
Dude, I learned to speak English from Sesame Street and Pee Wee Herman, so I'll always love that.
That explains so much.
Oh, we're gonna talk a
That's
lot
why
on the
it's
fire.
best
Don't worry. That's when we're really gonna open up.
That's where you get your favorite movies from, isn't it, Pee Wee Herman? Or no?
The movie theater. You know. That's something different.
You guys can't see this on camera, but never mind.
Yeah. Hey, don't jump.
No, it's just.
That's okay.
All right, so let's bring this around the home stretch. Any last thoughts about Rothbard that we haven't covered?
I talked about this a little bit before. If you have any interest in liberty or freedom, you read this book. This is the #1 book you should read.
Absolutely.
It is short. It is to the point. It covers different aspects. This is the book you read, period. It's the best book for any budding libertarian.
Here's the best. Forget the content. Here's the best argument. Every chapter is like 3 pages.
It's
You
really
can get
so
through
quick.
3 pages to get to the next subject.
It's a pamphlet. I want people to understand this isn't a book. It's more of a pamphlet than anything else. When written in a normal font and
But if you say book, people feel
there's
proud
a lot
when
of
they
footnotes
read
in it that take up some space on the
Yeah.
pages that you don't necessarily have to read. You can definitely read them and look into them to do the research to understand where he's coming from. But at the end of the day, it's a pamphlet. It's an essay on exactly everything we've talked about. And if you want to understand anything that's going on in the political realm today, read this book. It will open your eyes. It's like, oh, now I know why they did what they did. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, Trump did it too. Oh, they're both wrong. Oh, we're screwed.
What's crazy is that
Every single much in the living room.
If you don't finish this feeling depressed, you read it wrong.
right. And part of it too is that, like this.
Take her down hard. Let's go.
But if you want a good example of kind of trying, not that I want to support like any state governments, but like if you want to see like an interesting breakdown, look at the power struggles between the federal government and states like South Dakota and Florida, and then look at the reaction of other states like Michigan, here in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. Like, look at the power struggles there. And even with the citizens within South Dakota and Florida, they are going at each other because they're trying to, some groups are trying to flip it back to give the government more power. And the governors are like, nah, bro,
Nah, dog.
we'll be good.
Yeah.
Like, in Florida, they're just living life. They're living their best life right now. And in South Dakota too. And so it's just interesting to see, like, if you want to look at this book and then look at each individual state and look at the power struggles that's going on between the federal government. South Dakota and Florida are a really great place to start. Frankie, here you go.
It's not, and it's also, it's not like,
That was my.
it's not like the government is reading this book and saying, this is like a playbook, or they're going by a playbook. Why this pamphlet is so good is because it's describing natural behavior of a power structure. It's natural. Everything that happens in here is what naturally happens. It's not somebody who's taking this and saying, oh, I'm going by these rules. Subconsciously, this power structure of the government is going into this order. And this is exactly how it's described. That's why it's so good.
Scott, the drug mule, did you have anything to add?
I do not have any controlled substances on me right now besides the alcohol.
Giant man pocket.
Officer.
So much room.
Giant
So
man.
much room in his
His lady
man
pocket
pockets.
front hole.
I apologize for mansplaining to you with my pockets on my jeans, but
Jealous about your
you brought it up. Do I have any thoughts? No, I mean, the ATF should be abolished. That's about it.
Very timely. Go ahead, Frank.
Here, one more. Oh, go ahead, Frankie.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead.
No, I'm gonna take some questions. So if you want to do your little.
I was just gonna say, it's just so rational. As you read through it, there's no, like, he explains it so fully that it's very difficult to argue it. So if you're looking, I don't know, for like a blueprint to kind of figure out what the state does in your own life, it's really important to read this book.
Like, even if you don't have like
Whatever
sort
the
of,
fuck they're calling it.
if you don't have that like anarchist foundation, you read it and it's very
You're like,
simple,
oh,
and they'll be
there's
like,
a lot of
look,
aha
this-
moments.
Or why
And,
put it in
oh,
parentheses? Why
or,
put it in
hell
quotation?
yeah.
you know why, bro. The alphabet boys that you guys are
I
wearing.
don't care about the alphabet.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, I'm sorry I do. This is on YouTube. I'm
It's
so
his
sorry.
birthday, but pay him a visit later. But no, don't do that.
Mike,
I hope your
condolences
dog's
for your
locked up,
dog.
bro.
No, that's all right. My dog's upstairs, guys. My dog's upstairs. He can't get to the
He's
door.
like, it's my birthday. I'm about to get fucked. Not this way.
Damn, I thought it was my wife was gonna do it.
Hopefully, armor makes body armor for your dogs.
All right.
I would say, just so like one, like on a final, like kind of like sum up thought on the book. A lot of us get stuck in this left versus right paradigm.
Not the case.
This book bridges all of that bullshit, because what you'll see is when the opposing side that you don't identify with, when they run that playbook, okay, what you're going to see is your side runs it too. They run the same exact playbook. And that's the one thing that anyone can take away from it, regardless of their political persuasion or if they're independent or whatever. Yeah, so what they should take away from it. It's like, you know, the biggest problem is if you think your guy can do the egregious shit because it's your guy, right? That shouldn't be the answer. The answer is no one should do that.
Here's the last one. So I want to throw this question in and then we'll go back. Jason's saying, we actually kind of covered this before. Could you go into how he talks about the two ways to acquire resources? I think he's referring to
Violence.
production, making it yourself out of private property and your
Yeah,
labor
it's
versus
social versus state.
yes. And then the other
We
one
did-
is theft.
Yeah, we touched on that earlier. We talked about how there is there is the social, and what was the words?
It's social power versus state power.
Social
Yes,
power
that's
versus
it.
state power.
Power.
Thank you. Yeah, there's social power versus state power. So the social power gives you the opportunity where people are privately coming together, accumulating capital, working the lands, trading, making sure, hey, you need some of this, I got some of this. Why don't you give me some of that? I'll take some of this. Awesome, thank you. Talk to you later. And then all of a sudden, a group of people come together and they say, hey, we got to organize this a little bit better. And I need a cut of that because I don't got nothing to produce and give to you. So what's going to happen is I'm going to come in here. This is my authority. And we're going to take that from you and we're going to keep it. And we're going to give a little bit of it to that guy over there. We got some friends over here. We're going to give most of it to them. So yeah, cool, man. Thanks very much. And oh, no, you don't want to? Here, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, so he brings up a notion early in the book where he says, originally you have these like warring tribes, and one chieftain would like take his troops and kill everybody and rape all the women and pillage all the goods, and then they had stuff. And then they would use the stuff, and then there's no more stuff. So then they had to go rape and pillage another village, another town. And he brings up that the natural progression of that. And actually, Stefan Molyneux has like a great video about this too. It's called like, I know you don't like him, but he has a great video about this called like, You Are a Slave or something. It's the same idea. And he says that eventually the state realizes, no, instead of just like killing everyone, why don't I just make them my subjects and let them have some perception of freedom, and they'll produce for me, like I can get milk from them like a cow every day instead of slaughtering it.
Violent taxes every year.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was like, what if they don't have any cows? We're good.
It's an analogy. Yeah, say a body part for us into the microphone. There you go.
I don't know if we can get milk for that, but he's not doing it.
So
You're not
I
looking for
think,
the right
and
kind of
I think where he really hits on that the hardest, is how the state transcends its limits. When he goes into that, he really starts to paint the picture of what the state is actually doing and how it is separating itself from those private resources and from people who are naturally working together and socially doing the social power versus the state power. And in that part of the book, he really hits home hard. Honestly, there's not a page he doesn't hit home hard.
Rothbard always hits it
I was
hard.
after this, the Flyers lost 6-1.
They suck. Flyers suck.
All right, guys. So to wrap it up, I just want to bring a more like abstract point here to the people at the Blue Star or the Why Libertarian audience. You know, our motto, you know, that Nick and I work together to try to push in New Jersey is building a culture of consequence. And like, what does that mean to me? Many people, like when they start nonprofit groups or political activism groups, it's all predicated on how can we get people to vote like me? Right? How can I convince them to go into the booth and pull my colored team's, lever, blue, red, whatever, yellow, whatever it happens to be. And we don't subscribe to that philosophy, at least not in the way that we think is the most effective. Take into example, New Jersey. I don't care how eloquent you are, how convincing your arguments are. You can go to every urban neighborhood in New Jersey and preach to them the merits of the Second Amendment or autonomy or free markets. You're going to lose, and Democrats are going to run the state. There's nothing you can do. It's a demographics game. It's not an intellectual game, right? So to me, the meaning of that phrase and why we're doing things like this, right, is to get people to come together and have conversations. We're kind of biased because we're all probably on a similar side of the political spectrum in terms of our opinions, but a lot of people aren't. And someone who picks up this book, I know that this book is something that would monumentally change my outlook on the way I view politics. Mm-hmm. And it does it, like I said, very succinctly. It literally, I feel like Rothbard is carrying your hand and going, look, here's the first, I'm serious. Like if you read the opening chapter, it's like, look, this happens, right? And when this happens, let me take you to the next step. This is the conclusion. And if this is the conclusion, this is the next one. And it's very easy to follow.
It's laid out very simply.
Very simply. So if you can expose people to new ideas, if you get someone to have a conversation, today we're talking about Rothbard, maybe next week, maybe next month we're having a get together to talk about something else.
I think it's Spooner.
Spooner? There we go.
Bro, I think. Wait.
That's the most excited I've seen him in two White Claws.
Let's digest some Spooner. Let's wake some motherfuckers up.
No, wait, listen. I think. Listen.
You want to talk about? Oh my God! You want to talk about the illegitimacy of the Constitution?
But I think the next logical step is a good understanding of economics.
Right.
Because in order for you to appreciate a lot of things that Spooner says, you also need to understand your worth as a person when it comes to the economic level. And I think that's why, for me, I would try to say that for the next book club, we should do economics in one lesson, especially because we might have a lot to give away as well.
Yes, we're going to make some announcements on that. So everybody on Why Libertarian, thanks for checking us out. Love you guys. Love Matt's show. What did I miss? I have to go between the two cameras. And for the people in the Star Union, don't forget to check out laurenzaki.coffee. 10% off if you put in
Phenomenal coffee.
If you put in code Blue Star, but also you can. Frankie says to support Feed
Relax,
Philly.
all y'all.
Yes. Awesome, guys. Thanks for being here. This is a great first meeting. Let's go burn a fire outside and talk about abortion.
Oh, I'm the only one clapping. Okay.